It is November 4th, 2021. My name is Emma Maggart, Maggart. I'm with the Indiana Jewish Historical Society, and we are in the Lafayette Jewish Cemetery. I am with
Pearlman Cortner. When I got married, I dropped my middle name and put Pearlman, my maiden name, into my legal name and added my married name. I've been involved with the cemetery since I was little. We have a lot of Pearlmans and relatives buried here, so it was always a special place. And I think when my father couldn't find people to take care of the cemetery, we were cutting the grass. He was on the cemetery committee forever.
And what was his name?
Jack Pearlman.
Jack Pearlman.
Yeah. And basically, a long time ago, his parents had the foresight to buy a 8-plot, which is kind of a standard size in the old days. Now people move more, so a lot of people's kids won't live here or be buried here.
Right.
But basically, my grandfather was a dentist, Dr. Lewis H. Pearlman, and he was a veteran, and he was a dentist locally in Lafayette. And Dorothy Pearlman was his wife. She actually was at Purdue, which is rare back in those days.
Yeah.
And we have very strong personalities in the Pearlman family, especially the women. But she was at Purdue, and then she dropped out and got married and was a society editor for the Journal and Courier on the what's going on in Lafayette.
Yeah.
And Lewis was not in the scrap business, but the other two, Sam and Harry, were in the scrap business. So when my dad grew up, he would, help at it, and then he went to war, World War II veteran. And when he came back, he went to Purdue, but he knew he had the business.
Yeah.
So he didn't stay at Purdue long, and took over the family business. And I remember Uncle Harry and Uncle Sam. Grandpa Lou died, maybe he was 5 or 6, of a heart attack, and back in those days you didn't get to the hospital real quick.
Yeah, it just happened.
His interesting thing, what I heard, was that because back then they held the x-ray things in your mouth with their thumb, so eventually your thumb dropped off. So.
Oh gosh.
But this is one of my favorite spots.
It's really lovely.
Except for that tree, because we can't grow grass.
Oh.
And we're in very good standings because Arnie Cohen's over there, the Cohens, Leona Cohen played bridge with my mom and grandma, and then the Winskys, who you heard about, because Doris was a bridge player too, so we figure they're all together.
Yeah.
But on this side, and we are very Reformed Jews. Very, very Reformed. I would say none of us knew Hebrew. I had to learn it for my bat mitzvah. Not all of us had a bat mitzvah. I did. My sister had one when she was 40.
Okay.
My sister Julie is the middle one. She's not here. And she married a man from Mexico. And they have 2 kids who are raised Jewish and had bar mitzvahs and things. It is very not traditional to put out a stone before you're buried.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably a no-no. However, it had been done before, and my son is, my kids are not Jewish. We kind of raised them Jewish and Methodist and everything. I did foster care. We adopted kids.
Oh, that's nice.
Southern Baptist, Pentecostal, 2 Catholics, the
all
realm.
over the place.
Yeah. So after my parents died, I wanted it simple for my son when I die. Mm-hmm. Also, at some point, when my dad was doing great, he said, I want to go make all the stones and take care of that. And of course, I'm like, I'll take care of my own stone. I'll pay this. But at that point, my sister Julie is in Las Vegas and will never come back here. My sister Jackie's in Philadelphia, but she wanted to be in the family plot. So we have stones out already, which is not traditional. But
They
it's
got their
kind of
spot
nice.
here.
I like it.
Yeah.
But probably of anything, my dad is very family-oriented, tradition. The interesting thing about our stone is on this side it has an A.
Yeah.
And on the other side it doesn't, because of the scrap business. I guess they dropped the A in the scrap business
Okay.
They seem to all get along. We don't know why. So, and then
There's
that's
some
the
sort of
thing for my dad's
distinction.
World War II. But I guess the claim to fame is that my grandmother, when she married her husband, he was with the Shoal.
Okay.
And back then, they didn't really interact.
Yeah.
And so,
And was she with the temple at that point?
yeah, she was
Okay.
at the temple. And her parents are actually the Rices. They're buried right over here. Yeah.
Okay.
We got the extra plot, you know. But so they're over there, as well as my grandma lost a younger brother at age 8 to I think polio was going on then or
Oh, yeah,
something. Yeah.
Polio era.
Not great. My back and the pain meds. So my dad used to joke about how his parents were the first, you know, interfaith marriage, even though it was Jewish.
Yeah.
Because
The
back
different
then
sex
she
of
said,
Jews.
"Oh no, I didn't know him, and he was Joel." And so a lot of them over here. So we always do this both.
Yeah.
Even though it's Shoal and Temple, when it comes to the cemetery, we're good.
Yeah.
They have some big differences on why they decided we couldn't merge. One being cremains. They don't believe in that. And there were some other differences of that made it such that they wouldn't merge officially. But like these are all Pearlman. So after my grandma got married, very strong-willed, they all moved to the temple.
Okay. Just all follow.
Yeah, you know, so but we, you know, we still consider all this for Pearlmans, and a lot of these people were related to via, you know, the Gamzos, and just a lot of people we're still related to that are on this side. But no, my dad never knew Hebrew. My mother didn't know Hebrew. And so as we became more traditional in the temple, even though we're Reformed, a lot more Hebrew music going on. A lot more singing.
Yeah.
It's just a different era. And I'm one of
Definitely.
those, and this is just so awful. But if they didn't do it when my grandma was alive, I'm doing it. I don't put stones out. We didn't do that back then.
No.
I'm much more of a, that's sort of when grandma died, she was kind of the matriarch.
Okay.
So I suppose like many families, the traditional things kind of disappeared.
Yeah.
She always had
the
us
matriarch.
at, you know, the Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays of the Jews.
Right.
And so it kind of, you know, isn't as much.
Yeah.
But yeah, so,
Which one is her, Dorothy?
yeah. And we kind of joke because she's the matriarch and her stone never settled.
No,
So
it's
she's
still up.
Yeah. You have to understand Pearlman humor, but yeah. And you know, when she died, because I hadn't had a lot of experience with death,
Yeah.
and she was older and it made sense, you know, and she was bedfast. But I would come, I was just so upset, and I would come and I would sit on Grandpa Lou and have a cigarette just as though we were sitting on her couch with her having a cigarette too, and talk. My father's like, "You're doing what?" But
that's how you
yeah, so
cope
that
with
was
it.
tough. That was a tough one for me.
Yeah.
Because she was my grandma, you know, and she lived local and we visited. I actually invited her to live with us. She said, "You live in the country and you have too many kids." No. So she ended up going to a facility.
And what constitutes country? Were you like just out of town limits?
No, you know West Point? You ever heard of West Point?
No.
That's country.
Okay.
My husband was working for my dad then, and he worked there was a yard in Crawfordsville.
Okay.
So
Crawfordsville, I know.
yeah, so it was kind of like halfway in the middle of nowhere.
All right.
But yeah, she was something. She was very involved in sisterhood, and very outspoken. And I remember one of her stories being, she wanted to drive to Chicago, which the cars did it, but you know it was a big trek. And she said, "I remember asking Lou if I could go, and he said, 'You don't ask.' You know, we discussed. You don't ask me for things, you know," which was very progressive.
Yeah,
you know.
very.
Back then, I mean, the women were still kind of. But she went up. There's tons of newspaper articles. She went up in like some visiting airplane before they were big. She was real gutsy.
Yeah.
She talks about when the KKK came to town,
Really.
and they. I guess they were considered good people, my family, my grandparents, but she talked about how somebody kind of pulled up on their horse and said, Mrs. Pearlman, you need to go this direction. We're
Mm-hmm.
coming through. So,
Yeah.
and during the Depression, Grandma would talk about how there were several families that were pretty stable, and how several of the women would, get milk and stuff and take it to the schools
Mm-hmm.
where, kids didn't have a lot of food during the Depression and stuff. So yeah, we were raised very much, and I think it's a Jewish tradition, very much that you give back.
Mm-hmm.
That's the term now. But we were raised on doing volunteer work and everything. It was very much stressed that education was important. That one didn't go over so well with me in the beginning. But I finally graduated. And then I went on and got a master's. I'm a social worker.
Oh, okay.
So I taught social work at Purdue, and then they closed the program. So I did advising in different majors. But I think it's interesting. No one really knew there was a Jewish cemetery.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I came out one time and the urns were all tipped over. They weren't, they weren't broke really, but they were tipped over. And I'm mad. And I called my dad and I said, I'm going to call the cops. He said, no, we don't want the publicity.
Yeah.
People don't know we exist. Well, somebody did, but you know what I'm saying.
Did. Yeah, but you want to keep it private,
so
you
you
can keep
didn't
it
want to
up.
know. So it's only until the GPSs now people can Google if they want to know, and so it's a little different. I mean, because back when we started having a couple issues, so the police were like, "Where's the Jewish cemetery?"
Yeah.
But we have had some stuff, but nothing, no terrible vandalism.
That's good.
And I think it's mainly probably kids and people like that and stuff.
Yeah.
Neighbors here are wonderful. If there's a problem, they let me know. I downsized and bought that house over there.
Okay.
Tiny little national home. I love it.
Yeah.
And so, because it was near the cemetery, my friend owned it, and I was like, this sounds good.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But it is, and it's just, it's just rustic looking. I love it, except that trees make it so the sun doesn't grow grass easy. But it really, we have beautiful deer.
Oh, yeah.
I'll show you a deer video.
Would love to see that.
But it's, and we have the mausoleums for people that want to be buried above ground. We have a cremation area for people if you don't have a regular plot. You could,
You can go over there.
You can get cremated. Like my dad wanted traditional casket. My mother wanted cremains. And but there's a famous potter in town called Scott Frankenberger. His pottery's wonderful. And so before my mom was sick, I was joking about how, hey, you like his pottery so much, I'll just get him to make a pot for your ashes. And we did. And she said, I like that idea.
Yeah.
So she literally is buried in a beautiful urn that Scott Frankenberger from near Battleground made.
Yeah.
And I've got mine already in
Ready
the
to
house,
go?
ready to go. Because I'll be cremated also. So we really respect what people want. As a cemetery committee, we really try and keep people happy.
Yeah. That's really good.
But yeah.
So how long have you been involved in the cemetery committee?
I'm almost thinking it has to be over 10 years. My dad's been gone 8 years. And Kathy's dad got me on it. I mean, before I was helping my dad, but I wasn't on the committee.
Yeah.
So I would say 10 to 15 years. And we don't do that much. I mean, basically we hire people to do the grounds and blow the leaves. And the woman at the end there, that's a house owned by the temple.
Okay.
And so she's kind of a caretaker. She's very good at spotting people that shouldn't be here, although it's certainly open to anybody that wants to be, but certain times you can figure out who really wants to be here and shouldn't. And so she'll come over and kind of ask them what they're doing. Or, and we've had to call the cops a couple times, but it's so rare.
Yeah.
So rare, because most people are good people and
It's good to hear.
Yeah. No problems at all from, I mean, the worst we get is somebody will break all the flags or something, you know. But no, we had no trouble at all this year either.
Good.
I only had 2 trick-or-treaters though, so
That's
I mean,
so sad.
they weren't really out there, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's just, there's, we're not great of whoever organized it. They're all over the place, so it's really hard for the mowers, but I love it's very rustic,
Yeah.
which
It
will
is.
always be, but yeah.
How much room for expansion? Because I believe it started like 1840s with the cholera epidemic.
Yeah.
At the back.
Yeah, and like none of my family was here back then.
Okay.
And so we've got room to go that way. We just actually had a death not too long ago, and they wanted to kind of start a family plot. So then we got some more people. So we're heading that away.
Yeah.
Will we fill it ever? We've got a lot of single ones we can still fill in and stuff. And with cremains, you can fit more in.
Exactly.
So yeah. So
the transfer to that.
yeah, I don't see us running out. Certainly not in my lifetime, maybe. But yeah, the lineage of Judaism will end here in town, probably in our family when I go. My sister is out there. Then the Pearlman name will continue because one of my dad's cousins, I don't know, it's probably like every religion maybe does this, but in Judaism, if there's somebody who's older, you call them aunt and uncle. So I was like, probably about 10 years old when I realized, wait a minute, these aren't really my relatives.
Yeah.
And
all the distinctions get blurred.
yeah. So these are more Pearlmans. He was a cousin. He's a well-known lawyer in town. So that's their branch. And his son is out in Boston, and his daughter just had a bat mitzvah. So the Pearlman name for a while, and he's got a son. So we're like, we're good. The Pearlman name is going to continue. And he got married late in life, and his wife's still alive. She lives at Westminster.
Great.
So yeah, but yeah, we related to tons of people. I like that's
good.
I
Connected
like
all
it.
over.
I think it's fun,
I think so too.
One thing I guess I'm proud of is the American Legion for the veterans on Memorial Day will come out, and all these little old veterans, not so many now, but older ones come out, and they stand with their guns and they play taps.
Oh, that's so
nice.
nice.
I cry the whole time.
Yeah.
But and Dad always met him. I think he probably missed one his whole life. Out here, and they all just line up. And so they bring flags, and we put them on all the veterans. We really think of that as important.
Yeah,
because we
it
had a
really
lot of
is.
veterans, obviously. And so that's a neat service that we do with them. So that's pretty cool.
Definitely.
They say we have the most people come out for it. We only have like maybe 15, 20. So I guess the other cemeteries
Just doesn't do anything.
I mean, they go there, but they say they said you're our best crowd.
Well, I'm glad they do that sort of thing. It's important to
I think so.
show that memorial.
Dad was really, he didn't attend a lot of the veteran stuff, but certainly it was important to him. Again, that generation didn't talk about the war, and then all of a sudden everybody's talking about it. You're supposed to go home and ask your grandparents, which probably wasn't nice always to do. We did not have a lineage back really to the Holocaust. My grandfather on my other side came over as an immigrant and made it in America.
Where did he immigrate from?
The maps change. Poland, Czechoslovakia, somewhere around
region,
in there. Yeah.
It gets so tricky over
Oh,
there.
I know. But he came over, as a young child, and was successful. And he loved to tell us the Horatio Alger in America. You can be anything. My dad didn't talk about the war until we started asking, but you just got to feel you didn't ask too much. What was the worst part of the war? Powdered milk, he would say. So, that's how he was going to deal with it.
That's just how you cope.
And he was a bombardier, which meant you're dropping bombs on people. And probably the accuracy wasn't that good,
Yeah.
So we didn't, you kind of got to feel, okay, I'm not going to ask anymore.
Yeah, there's just certain things that can't be visited in that sense.
Yeah. But we have, we pretty much use humor a lot in our family.
Well, it's good. Keep it light.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, so I'm all set to die, not quite yet. But we're trying to, keep it so it's open to people and people can visit and not feel.
Which relative in your branch of the family is the oldest person to be living in Lafayette? Is that one of the stones we looked at?
To be still living? No, they wouldn't be still living.
No, was it your grandpa or
probably my dad?
Okay.
Oh, you mean before him?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, his dad's buried here. His father came over, and he might be buried over there. My dad loved to do the genealogy.
Yeah.
He had me come with him to the library, and so you ever heard of microfiche?
Yeah.
Okay. So you're always going the wrong direction.
Yep.
So we're trying to find something on somebody, and we're going the wrong direction. It lands on something, and he's like reading it, going, "That's on my dad." On something he's reading, he's going, "Guess my dad was robbed while I was over in the war." So it's like,
That's one way to find out
yeah,
stuff.
so find out some more stories. But yeah. But Dad really, my dad was just a good old boy from Lafayette.
Yeah.
He met my mother, who was Chicago, New York.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was an interesting, they each educated the other on things.
Yeah.
But it was interesting.
Did they meet in college?
No, pretty much a blind date set up by two grandmas. So it wasn't arranged, but it was arranged.
Yeah.
Both of them decided they had needed to get married as they were getting old.
Oh my.
But yeah. But otherwise, no. In fact, we just never had the pressure. If we had had pressure to date only Jews, oh my gosh, I would never have dated anybody. But that's not true. But we never had the pressure. Yeah, it was, and so, so yeah. I mean, it was never said I could or couldn't. Now, I think my parents, family members, my father wanted him to stay in the faith. His sister did not. My mother's married my dad, but her sister did not marry in the faith. And so all of those kids were either raised nothing or raised or on their own have chosen Christianity.
Okay.
And so, same with me. I married a Methodist, so we raised the kids Methodist and Jewish. But it's hard to raise people Jewish because if you sit at a service, it's really boring because of the Hebrew. So they can't really read it to understand.
Yeah, it gets
and
complicated.
stuff. But they liked Hanukkah when it came earlier. Because you get presents. And when Grandma was alive, we did a lot more of the holidays, and the kids would go. So they got exposed to both. Yeah, it's just, and I went through the embarrassment of being Jewish and when you're not a lot of Jewish kids.
Yeah.
I think now, because I tend to be very social action-y, and originally I did it as a social worker, and now I do it as a Jewish person concerned, because things are getting pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Hopefully they won't hit around here.
I hope, yeah.
But it's good to have Purdue here, and so but a lot of the Purdue professors, because there's a lot of Jewish ones.
Yeah, I'm finding that out. The more people I talk to,
really
it's great.
are. But they may not be. I don't like the word religious, but you know what I'm saying?
Like observant.
Yeah, observant. That's a good word. And so, yeah. And so we don't typically bury them here unless they make their home here. A lot of times when they retire, they go somewhere else.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah. No, we'll take them. And we're very reform. If somebody's Jewish and their spouse isn't, we'll let them be buried here. We just don't put no Christian symbols on.
Yeah.
Allowed. These really were business people in the community that really kept things going. The Lobes was a big department store. Steins were involved with a lot of things. Most recently, before he died, he had a huge warehouse selling things. Big Goodwill, but much cheaper and more personable, and he had people from domestic violence program working there to learn the skills of stuff. He worked with the Y, and he did a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
That's great.
His daughter Lori lives in town. His son Terry is in town. Todd lives elsewhere, but both very, very much on giving. And I think in Judaism, the best type of giving is without your name, giving it anonymously.
Right.
He certainly was wonderful at that.
So a lot of these families were involved in giving
Really
back to the community, upholding Lafayette.
It's very, very important. I wouldn't say they weren't also businessmen, but
you can have both.
Yeah,
you can have,
Well, my dad's place closed. He just never modernized. And we all worked there one summer. So my sister says to my father, I want to work in the junkyard. Dad's like, I don't let women work in the junkyard. And my sister says, you have to, women's lib. And he's like, fine, you're all working here. I don't know.
Like, how did I get pulled into that?
Remember. So he's thinking it's pretty funny. So he's got one of us on the shaker table. Julie's in the paper warehouse. And I'm burning copper. That is not a nice job. So at noon, I'm like, and then of course he takes us out for lunch to parade us off. And then I come back and I just start crying. I don't want to do that. And he had hired a woman in the office by name, Tina. And so I got to help Tina in the office. But if somebody came in mad because like their husband had spent all the rent money getting drunk or something, he'd go, she wants to be a social worker. You go over and talk to her. So But it was interesting. Unfortunately, none of us wanted the business. It just wasn't. You know, I'm a social worker. My other sister's a union organizer with a social work degree, and the other one's a paralegal. So we were just
totally different paths.
Yeah.
So what year was this you worked there?
Oh gosh, I think it was like when I was probably like 16 or something, or 17. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Because he joked and said, "Well, let's see if anybody wants the business."
No. And you already had your mindset on social work at that point.
Yeah, I really did. But it was interesting to watch the business, because he really, I mean, people could say it was terrible that he paid, I'm sure he paid awful, but he had a soft spot for alcoholics. So these were illiterate alcoholics. I remember one night, we got a call in the middle of the night. You could hear the phone. And in the morning, I'm like, "Dad, who called so late?" "Oh, it was a jail." I said, "It was a jail?" I said, "What happened?" He said, "Oh, one of the guys got picked up for robbing a place." And I said, "So you're going to get him out?" And he said, "Yeah, I got to get him to run the crane in the morning." And then he had robbed that. It's just like he robbed your place. They caught him in your yard stealing, and you're getting him out so he can run the crane. No, I mean,
okay.
But he really helped people out. But I'm sure the conditions and the pay wasn't good. But,
And did the business die with him then?
No, he sold out before, and then he worked at Winsky's for a while. Till I mean, even though they're businessmen and it's competition, that Judaism and bond of small business guys
It's stronger.
is stronger.
And so they were able to work together to continue to benefit Lafayette as a whole community.